At first, it feels like freedom, and it is, but then a strange thing appears. A silence that stretches too far. A lack of drive. The things that once moved you, ambition, desire, competition, fall away like leaves in autumn. And in the falling, something unexpected arises: emptiness. Why does motivation disappear after awakening? Because what used to push you was never truly yours. It was the voice of fear, of wanting, of not being enough. When that voice fades, so too does the urgency. You are no longer driven, and this can feel like being lost. But you are not lost, you are just no longer running. The world will call it laziness, apathy, depression perhaps, but in truth it is a deep pause, a return to the center. The body still moves, the breath continues, but the inner noise has gone quiet. The old self, the one who needed to become someone, no longer holds the reins. And without it, motivation as you knew it dies. Do not rush to replace it. Do not force yourself back into the old fire. Instead, sit with the stillness. Observe it. Let it reshape you. In time, a different kind of movement arises, one that is not born from lack, but from clarity. Not from ambition, but from alignment. You do what must be done. Not to become, but simply because it is true. This is not the end of motivation. It is the birth of a new kind, quieter, rooted, unshakable, a path without striving, yet full of presence. Let yourself fall into this silence. Before awakening, life often feels like a long pursuit. We chase recognition, possessions, titles, love, validation, believing these things will bring us wholeness. In that endless chase, we feel motivated, even if restlessness fuels it. There's a certain fire that comes from not feeling enough. That fire drives people to build empires, conquer goals, accumulate success. But beneath all that motion is a kind of suffering, a hunger that never ends. Then one day, something shifts. It doesn't always come in dramatic fashion. Sometimes it's just a quiet pause, a question that echoes too deeply, a realization that the person you've been striving to become doesn't actually exist. The mind stops, not because it was told to, but because it finally sees through itself. That's the moment of awakening. You look at your life, your identity, your desires, and suddenly they lose their weight. At first, it may feel like liberation, a deep breath after years underwater. The illusions fall away, but then something unexpected happens. A kind of stillness enters, a lack of motivation, where once there was burning desire. The things that used to excite you, push you, make you feel alive, now seem distant, hollow, almost absurd. The goals you once thought were everything suddenly feel meaningless. This can be confusing. The world you left was full of striving, full of dreams and hustle, and now you feel as though you've lost something essential. The sharpness, the urgency. People around you may say you've become indifferent, lazy, or directionless. But they don't see what you've seen. They are still chasing shadows, and you have turned to face the light. You no longer move from craving. The ego that once needed to prove itself is gone or dissolving. Without it, the engine of your old life stalls. And so the mind asks, what now? But this is not a question to answer with words. It's a question to sit with. This emptiness is not depression. It's spaciousness. It's the dismantling of the false self. You are no longer who you thought you were, and so the old motivations no longer apply. You're not broken. You're simply becoming real. What you are experiencing is not a lack, but a pause. Not a collapse, but a return. Life is recalibrating. The heart is learning to beat without conditions. The body is learning to move without command. And slowly, a different kind of movement begins to arise, one that doesn't come from fear or comparison or desire, but from deep clarity. You may still act, work, speak, create, but the action no longer defines you. The doing flows from being, not from need. You don't strive to become, you express what already is. This is a quieter fire, steady, grounded. It doesn't shout, it doesn't push, it simply moves. Allow this space, let the silence wash over you. Don't rush to rebuild the ego's house. Let it remain in ruins and see what grows in its place. Eventually, you will discover that motivation does return, but not in the form you knew it. It is no longer a weapon of the ego. It is the rhythm of your true nature, aligned with the moment, free from grasping, fully alive. That is the gift hidden in the stillness. Not nothingness, but truth. Not apathy, but peace. Not paralysis, but presence. There comes a time, after awakening, when the urge to push, to strive, to climb begins to fade. It's not because you've lost strength or discipline. It's because the engine that once powered all your efforts, the belief that you had to become something more than what you are, has gone quiet. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself to the world or even to yourself. What remains is stillness. Before this shift, striving was constant. You were always reaching, always trying to get somewhere. Maybe it was a better job, a better version of yourself, a higher spiritual state, or just the next goal to tick off the list. And in that motion, there was always tension, a sense that something was missing, and you had to fill the gap through action. That tension was mistaken for purpose, the constant inner voice saying, faster, better. It gave direction, even if it exhausted you. But awakening reveals something subtle and profound. That voice was not you. It was a survival mechanism, a conditioned pattern, a habit of mind. When the mind sees this deeply, it stops obeying that voice. It watches instead of chasing. And in that watching, stillness begins to rise. This stillness is not laziness. It's not stagnation. It's not a lack of care. On the surface, it may look like nothing is happening, but within, something far more powerful is unfolding. The struggle to become dissolves, and what remains is being, presence, a deep sense of sufficiency. You may notice you no longer feel compelled to do something just because everyone else is doing it. You don't move just to stay busy. You're no longer seduced by the idea that your worth is tied to your achievements. So you slow down, not because you're falling behind, but because you finally see there's nowhere to run. This can feel strange at first. For a mind used to noise and motion, silence feels like emptiness. For a heart used to yearning, peace can feel like nothingness. But slowly, you begin to see the stillness is alive. It is not inaction, but a deep listening, a readiness, a state of harmony with the present moment. In this space, you do what needs to be done, but you don't obsess over outcomes. You work, but the work does not consume your identity. You act, but there is no compulsion. You respond, but not react. Life continues, but you are no longer chasing it. Stillness becomes the foundation. It allows space between impulse and action, space to see clearly. And from that clarity, a new kind of doing arises, one that is effortless, because it is free from inner conflict. In the absence of striving, you don't collapse, you align. The body moves, the heart beats, the mind thinks, but all in tune with the present, without force, without friction. This is the paradox. The less you strive, the more life flows through you. The quieter you become, the more power you carry, not the power of control, but the power of alignment. A river does not try to move forward, it just flows, and in its flow, it carves through mountains. Stillness is not the end of your path, it is the ground beneath it. There is a moment, quiet and subtle, when you begin to see that all the progress you thought you were making was only movement within a circle. For years, maybe a lifetime, you were conditioned to believe that life is about advancing, climbing, evolving step by step towards some imagined peak. There was always something ahead of you, a goal to reach, a flaw to fix, a better version of yourself to become. And so you ran with discipline, with fire, with hunger. You measured your worth by how far you had come and how much further you still needed to go. But after awakening, something changes. The illusion of progress begins to dissolve, not because you've stopped growing, but because you realize the one who was trying to grow was never real to begin with. The self you tried so hard to improve was just a mental construct, an idea built from memory, comparison, fear, and desire. And when you see through that self, the whole ladder you were climbing disappears with it. It's not that progress is false in a practical sense. Of course, we can learn new skills, refine abilities, become more capable in the world. But on the level of essence, on the level of being, there is nothing to improve. You realize that you are not a project, you are not incomplete. The very foundation of your striving was based on forgetting who you already were. This realization can shake you. If you are not here to become something, then what are you here for? If all the self-help, all the practices, all the future goals were just scenery in a dream, then what remains? A stillness begins to emerge, a deep silence. Not because you've given up, but because the chase has been exposed. And in that stillness, something else becomes clear. Life does not need you to become more. It needs you to be fully present. In fact, all the so-called progress was just taking you further from this presence. You were so busy improving yourself, you forgot to simply live. You were so focused on the horizon, you missed the beauty under your feet. Awakening pulls the veil back. You see that all the milestones were just mind-made concepts. That even your spiritual progress was often just ego in disguise, chasing transcendence as another form of identity. The spiritual seeker, the achiever, the warrior, all roles, all masks. When you see through the illusion of progress, it doesn't make you stagnant. It liberates you. You no longer act from lack. You no longer meditate to become enlightened, or serve to gain virtue, or grow to reach some imagined end. You simply express what is true in each moment, not to gain something, but because it is your nature. This does not mean you reject movement. It means you stop moving from desperation. You stop acting as if happiness lies around the next corner. You walk, but not to arrive. You grow, but not to escape. You change, but not because you're unworthy. Everything becomes lighter. Effort remains, but struggle fades. And in this way, the deepest transformation begins. Not the transformation of becoming someone new, but the return to what was never lost. Not progress in time, but the unfolding of timeless truth, a homecoming that was always waiting beneath your steps. Count, you don't need to chase progress anymore. You need only to open your eyes and see that you are already whole. There comes a point on the path, after a deep inner shift, when you look at the desires that once fueled you and realize they no longer belong to you. The cravings, the ambitions, the goals that once lit your mind on fire now seem foreign, as if they belonged to someone else. Some former version of you who believed fulfillment was always just one achievement away. You try to wear those desires again, like putting on an old coat, but they no longer fit. Not because they are too small or too big, but because they are no longer yours. Before awakening, your desires were the compass of your life. They shaped your identity. You wanted success, attention, approval, comfort, power, romance, recognition. Not because these things were inherently wrong, but because they offered the promise of completeness. And so, you spent your energy pursuing them. You built dreams around them. You sacrificed for them. And when you achieved them, even if only briefly, they gave you a moment of pleasure, a taste of validation. But that taste always faded, and the hunger returned. After awakening, a strange quiet replaces that hunger. You don't force it. You don't choose it. It simply arrives. You wake up one day and the longing is gone, or at least muted. You see a beautiful house, a luxury car, a prestigious job, or a seductive future, and something inside you doesn't react the same way. The pull is gone. The urgency has vanished. And in its place, there is space, not apathy, but freedom. Not numbness, but detachment. You might feel lost at first. If I no longer want what I used to want, then what am I doing? What is driving me? This space can be unsettling. The mind may try to resurrect old desires just to feel familiar. It may say, "You're falling behind. You're not trying hard enough. You need a new goal. But the heart is unmoved, the soul is silent, and deep inside, you know something fundamental has shifted. It's not that you become indifferent to life. You still enjoy things, you still care. But the thirst is gone. The desperation that once disguised itself as ambition is no longer running the show. You don't need to chase experiences to feel alive. You don't need to reach a certain milestone to feel worthy. The fire that once burned to become someone has cooled into a quiet presence. This change can be misunderstood. People around you may wonder what happened. They may say you've lost your edge, your passion, your drive. But what they can't see is that the fire hasn't died. It has changed form. It no longer burns outward in a desperate search. It glows inward, steady and calm. It no longer consumes you. It sustains you. Old desires don't fit because they came from a self that no longer exists. They were rooted in comparison, fear, and lack. And now that soil has dried up. In its place, something new begins to grow, an inner alignment that doesn't depend on wanting but on knowing. You begin to act not because you want more, but because you are moved by clarity. You begin to speak not to impress, but to express what feels real. You begin to live not as a seeker, but as someone who has found peace in the present. This is not the end of desire, but the beginning of a purer form. Desires may still arise, but they are softer, more transparent, more aligned with your true nature. They come and go like waves on the ocean, and you no longer chase them. You simply observe. You choose consciously. You respond from stillness, not from craving. And so, the old life falls away, not in a dramatic collapse, but in a quiet shedding. Layer by layer, the false desires dissolve. And what remains is truth, not what you wanted, but what you are. When you begin to taste true inner peace, the urgency to achieve in the outer world starts to fade, not because you become passive or careless, but because the fire that once drove you has quieted into a gentle warmth. The restlessness that once disguised itself as ambition has dissolved, and with it, the belief that your value depends on what you do, what you build, or how others see you. You start to realize that the feeling you were chasing through achievements, security, respect, fulfillment, was never out there. It was always meant to be found within. Before this shift, achievement was everything. The next milestone, the next success, the next opportunity was where you thought happiness lived. The pressure to improve, outperform, and be recognized felt constant. You measured your days by what you produced and your years by how far you had climbed. Even spiritual progress could become part of the race, another mountain to conquer. But after awakening to a deeper peace, something that doesn't come and go with circumstances, a new awareness grows. You no longer feel like you have to hurry. You no longer live under the illusion that joy is waiting at the end of some checklist. The mind becomes quieter, and so does the heart. The body still moves, responsibilities remain, and life continues. But the frantic need to prove yourself softens. You stop running. It's not that you give up on goals or stop caring about excellence. You may still create, serve, build, or grow, but your actions now come from a different place, not from lack, but from presence, not from compulsion, but from clarity. The desire to achieve is no longer fueled by fear of being left behind or the need to be someone. Instead, it becomes a natural expression of who you are, unfolding moment by moment. When you find peace within, the outer world loses its power to define you. Praise and criticism both lose their sharpness. Success no longer inflates you, and failure no longer destroys you. You see both as passing waves on the surface of something much deeper. And because you're no longer bound by outcomes, you're free to engage in life with more honesty, more sincerity. The pressure lifts, and in its place, grace enters. This inner shift can be difficult to explain to others. In a world that values constant motion and visible progress, stillness can be mistaken for weakness. When you no longer measure yourself by the usual standards, titles, trophies, timelines, others may think you've lost your edge. But you know the truth, you haven't lost anything. You've simply stopped searching for yourself in places you'll never find yourself. This peace doesn't make you less capable. In many ways, it makes you more powerful because your actions are no longer reactive. They are deliberate, rooted. Free from inner conflict, you become less attached to how things turn out and more devoted to how they're done. The process becomes more important than the product. Presence more important than performance. When inner peace becomes your home, achievement becomes a tool, not a destination. Not a destination. You use it when needed and set it down when it's not. You no longer chase the world. You let it come to you, and when it does, you meet it fully, without resistance or grasping. That is the quiet strength that arises when achievement loses its urgency. Not because it doesn't matter, but because it no longer defines who you are. After awakening, after the old illusions begin to fall away, there is often a quiet space left behind. A kind of pause between the life you once lived and the one that has not yet revealed itself. In this space, the old motivations no longer speak with the same force. The desire to prove, to win, to outperform, to be recognized, they fade like echoes from a dream you no longer believe in. The ambition that once fueled your days now feels empty. The urgency to achieve has vanished, and with it a question arises: without those things, what now moves me? This question is not one the mind can answer quickly. It isn't solved by setting new goals or shifting direction. Because this time, something deeper is required. You are no longer looking for another version of the same, striving in a different disguise. You are seeking a new kind of motivation, not one built on fear or longing, but one that arises from clarity, stillness, and presence. It may feel like nothing is happening at first. You may sit in this unfamiliar stillness and wonder why you are no longer compelled to do the things you once felt were so important. You may feel detached from the world, even lost, but you are not lost. You are simply no longer being pulled by the forces that once controlled you. The momentum of your past self has slowed. The inner structures that told you what mattered have collapsed, and from their ruins, something new must rise. This new motivation is not loud, it is not frantic, it does not come with promises of fame, success, or identity. It is subtle, quiet, grounded. It whispers, not shouts, and at first you may miss it, but if you listen deeply, you will begin to feel its pull, not as desire, but as a gentle knowing, a sense of rightness. You begin to act not because you're lacking something, but because something within you is ready to be expressed. This kind of motivation cannot be forced. It cannot be copied from others or drawn from comparison. It is born from alignment, from being rooted in truth, from allowing yourself to move only when it feels real. The actions that come from this space are not rushed. They are whole, whether it's creating, helping, building, resting, or simply being present with another person. You act from the center, not from the surface. What you discover is that this new motivation brings a deeper kind of fulfillment. It doesn't come with adrenaline or applause, it comes with peace. There is no chasing, only responding, no tension, only attention. You become less concerned with what you will get from your actions and more interested in whether those actions are honest. In this way, even the simplest gesture becomes meaningful. Even silence has purpose. This is not the end of ambition. It is its transformation. Ambition reborn without ego. Drive guided by stillness. Fire with no smoke. You may still dream, but your dreams are no longer escapes. They are invitations to serve life more fully, more humbly. You may still build, but you do not build to stand above. You build to connect, to create harmony, to honor what you are. Eventually, you see that the greatest motivation is not to become more, but to be what you truly are, fully, without distortion. From this place, everything flows naturally, nothing is forced, nothing is missing. And the path unfolds not ahead of you, but from within you, step by step with each breath in perfect time. So in the end, what seemed like the loss of motivation was not a loss at all. It was a return to what is real, to what is undisturbed by the rise and fall of ambition, to what does not need validation from the world to feel whole. After the noise of striving fades and the old desires dissolve, what remains is a life lived from stillness rather than struggle, from clarity rather than confusion. You do not move because you are empty. You move because something deeper calls you to move. You do not act to become someone. You act because you already are. And in this quiet, honest way of being, there is a quiet revolution. Not loud, not dramatic, not praised, but true, the kind of truth that does not need to prove itself. You don't lose motivation. You discover something more faithful than desire, a silent knowing that guides without force, a presence that needs no reward, and a peace that makes even the smallest moment feel complete.